Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2007 holiday fantasy comedy titled Fred Claus. Now, Fred Claus runs for 1 hour and 56 minutes long. It is directed by David Dobkin. It is produced by David Dobkin, Joel Silver, and Jesse Nelson. The script was written by Dan Fogelman. The story was written by Dan Fogelman and Jesse Nelson. It is composed by Christoph Beck. The cinematography by Remy Adafarison. And it was edited by Mark Levolsi. And the stars of the movie are Vince Vaughn, Paul Giamatti, Miranda Richardson, John Michael Higgins, Elizabeth Banks, Rachel Weisz, Kathy Bates, Trevor Peacock, Kevin Spacey, Bobb'e J. Thompson, Ludacris, Frank Stallone, Roger Clinton, Stephen Baldwin, Allan Corduner, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Okay, so what did I think of this movie? Well, I'm trying not to sound like a Scrooge here, but to be honest, I really did not like or enjoyed Fred Claus. I was hoping that it would probably stand out as an all-time great holiday classic from the late 2000s. But as it turns out, it was neither enjoyable or likable, because of the fact that there were just way too many subplots and way too many characters that didn't serve a purpose or a reason. And there's just a lot of illogical stuff that comes with the movie that just did not sit very well. And they weren't actually really fully weaved together. But there you go. I got that out in the open right away as I await for my piece of coal to be placed under the tree by those who disagree with me. However, if you agree with me, then I guess I assume that my presents are going to be something of more value than a lump of coal. Now, I'm not going to say that this was the worst movie I've seen in my life. I mean, it does have an arc about the trials and tribulations of sibling rivalry that is panned out nicely and simple. But the way it was executed was poorly done and incoherent. And that was because there were a lot of subplots intertwined in this movie that if they would have just stuck with at least one narrative about the sibling rivalry between the world-renowned Saint Nick, Santa Claus himself, Nicholas Claus, and his older brother Fred, and just stuck around the basis of this narrative, maybe this movie would have been better. It also probably would not have hurt if they would have just condensed the movie to maybe something like near the hour and 30-minute mark. Because I know that a family holiday movie that is almost like near the 2-hour range, well then guess what? There's going to be a lot of other subplots that they're going to pan over. I don't know which one it is that they were trying to gear at. Were they trying to gear at making this movie, the moral message that no kid is really conventionally bad? Were they actually trying to, go with the whole narrative that sibling rivalry is natural in the family household, but both siblings should have just as much equal respect as one another, and that no sibling should be given better treatment than the other? Or also, are they telling us something along the lines that even the most despicable individuals are not conventionally despicable but just misunderstood? I don't know. Because this movie is very muddled in which direction it wants to go. I mean, the sibling rivalry story is probably the one I'm invested the most, because it is a very commonplace thing in all family structures, from the traditional nuclear family, there's sibling rivalry there, as you know, as brothers and sisters tend to be somewhat competitive with each other. And then, of course, there's the more common dysfunctional family, where one sibling gets more attention than the other, and the other is just being stuck, put on the sidelines, and then being treated like a complete afterthought. And sure, the idea of making that movie with a Christmas theme around it may look interesting, but I just wish it would have been executed better. I'm not putting the actors or actresses down for their respective roles. They did fine. But it was just the fact that, I don't know, they're just, I don't know. It's just that sometimes when you take a main storyline and then you try to put more moral lessons implemented into the script, it just seems to be way off focus. So where does this whole sibling rivalry thing go? Well, the sibling rivalry account centers around Nick Santa Claus, played by Paul Giamatti, and his older and severely overlooked brother Fred, played by Vaughn. Now, when Nick was born, Fred promised that he was going to be the best big brother going. But then over time, Nick eventually ends up doing these rather selfish things to Fred, causing more and more resentment as the years go by, including knocking down Fred's tree to decorate his house, knocking over the birdhouse and killing the bird that was inside. And I thought Nick was supposed to be some saintly individual. And whereas Nick wants to go out and spread tidings of joy and happiness to people all around, Fred is just put on the sidelines. There was even a part where Fred gives Nick a present for his birthday, but instead of accepting the offer and saying, "Oh, that's so nice of you, Fred," no, instead he takes the gift that was given to Nick. Instead, Nick gives the present that was given to him by Fred, and Nick decides to just give it to someone less fortunate. I mean, how ungrateful is that? I mean, it just makes us think that good old Saint Nick is not entirely all that likable as you think. And because of that, Fred has grown into a deep resentment against his brother. So much so that over time he eventually abandons the Claus family, abandons the North Pole, and decides to just start a new life without the notion and the thought that his brother even exists. However, though, that's just kind of impossible because Nicholas Claus is loved by everyone all over the world, especially during the months of December, where he's definitely really being worshipped. So life has kind of been tough for the lesser known Claus sibling. And while his brother, Nicholas Santa Claus, has limited fans, has limitless fame all over. He's got a lot of fame, and he's beloved all over the world, riding in his sleigh, giving presents to everyone, bringing tidings of great joy to everyone, and everyone loves him and his colorful personality and his philanthropic ways, which makes him an icon, especially during the holiday season. And then there's Big Brother Fred, who is not necessarily in the spirit of giving, but in the spirit of taking. You see, Fred is now living in Chicago, and he is now a repo man, and he's also a con artist whose mindset is more in the spirit of taking rather than giving. And he's even doing other stuff too, like panhandling, by pretending that he's like one of these charitable Santa Clauses working for some kind of UNICEF-based charity, when really actually he's just conning his way into trying to scrounge as much money as he could, only to end up being chased by a bunch of fake Santa Clauses to the tune of the Trash Man Surfing Bird. Bird, 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 bird's the word, that song. Apparently, this whole debacle had eventually landed Fred in jail. However, his brother Nick bails him out. In return, he asks him to come work in the North Pole, to work in his workshop, to get everything ready for the big event, which usually happens around December 24th, and to make honest money for once. I believe Fred eventually lands sort of an office job, doing files and things like that. Like reading all his mail to make sure that kids get whatever presents they want on Christmas Day. And also he has sort of like some kind of a conveyor belt that determines which kids are on the nice list and which kids are on the naughty list. Of course, Fred is not exactly what you would call the happy, jolly soul that we are all led to believe. You see, Fred is described as kind of a bit of a cranky, not exactly trustworthy individual. There's even a scene during the opening scenes where he's doing his repo job and he repossesses a kid's television, and then he tells the kid, I'm doing you a favor so that you don't grow up and become a prostitute, which eventually lands him getting kicked in the shins. And then, I think he also tries to repossess something from a kid who goes by the name of Slam. And Slam said that all he ever wanted for Christmas was a puppy. And I think he kind of like befriends this young kid and things like that. So, and then there's some scenes there where he tries to, con his way and smooth talk his way with his girlfriend. His girlfriend's on the brink of dumping him because she finds that he's a total jerk, which he is. I mean, he's not exactly what you would call a very likable individual. She even says that, something along the lines like he forgot that it was her birthday, even though he tried to lie his way, had said that, listen, I'm going to take you out for dinner for your birthday. But instead of taking her out to an exquisite restaurant, he took her to some kind of trashy Chinese restaurant where they also have sumo wrestlers fighting in mud. Yeah, not exactly what you would call an idealistic, traditional birthday dinner, but he does these kind of things. And even though through all his flaws and through all his rather unlikable nature about him, he is actually not the villain in this story. In some ways, there are parts of you where you could tell that Fred is kind of a jerk, but then there's also a part of us that makes us think that maybe Fred is actually a very sympathetic lost soul because he's been stuck in the shadows of his younger brother Nick. And, we do feel bad for him. So though the conflicts between Nick can be pretty intense at times, it's never meant to be malevolent or really anything deeply personal. I mean, he doesn't have a misanthropy against the world. He's not like, a complete villain. He's just misunderstood, and he's pretty much just does not like being overlooked and stuck in the shadows of his more famous brother. I mean, it's basically just jealousy because one is beloved by so many, while the other brother can't stand being in the shadows of the other one. But then we had to ask ourselves, who is the real villain in the story? Well, that initiative is given to the efficiency expert, a shrewd businessman by the name of Clyde Archibald Northcutt, played by Kevin Spacey. And Clyde is visiting the North Pole. I don't know how he got there, but he is making his presence in the North Pole very, very stressful, especially to Santa Claus, because Mr. Northcutt wants to shut down the North Pole and take their business to the South Pole. It's also been revealed that Santa's workshop stock has been declining due to the flourishing internet demands, and that Santa's workshop is now starting to become obsolete because it seems that kids don't want anything from the Santa workshop. They want their gifts and their presents all year long from internet-based shopping centers like Amazon or Google or any other places that sell products. And they could easily get it from there, which kind of means that Santa's workshop is technically almost conventionally obsolete. And Clyde Archibald decided to make an ultimatum with Santa Claus, stating that if he doesn't, he has sort of a 3-strike system, which is very, very confusing. And if he steps over the line, he's going to get a strike. And if he gets a 3-strike, and if he gets 3 strikes on some kind of data, well, chances are Santa's workshop will be shut down forever. So therefore, his task is to make sure that unless if there's any improvements or updates on the workshop, Mr. Northcutt will have no problem in shutting down the operation. In many ways, Northcutt could almost be described as a 21st century version of Scrooge. Personally, he's actually one of these kind of guys who seems to be pro-cancel culture. I mean, he doesn't have a problem canceling Santa Claus, just as much as he also says he's got no problem canceling the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. So kids, if Santa gets 3 strikes, he's out. And if you're expecting presents under the tree, keep dreaming. Or Easter. Looks like you boys and girls are going to have no chocolate eggs or chocolate bunnies. But in some ways, I guess that's good. Because why have a toothache? Why have some teeth missing? Oh, and Christmas. Hey, Christmas is practically fascism with this whole good boy, girl, good girl, bad boy, bad girl imagery. Oh, and the Tooth Fairy. Once again, that's also capitalism. Because I know these days kids don't want a loony or a toonie in their under their pillows. No, they'd rather have something like 10s and 20s. So hey, guess what? Maybe it's all for the good. I mean, you kids are just so materialistic and so fascist in your ideologies that maybe this is all for the better. And maybe Mr. Northcott isn't really the villain in the story, but actually the unsung hero. But I guess, and of course, if you can hear from the tone of my voice, I'm only just being sarcastic and I'm just kidding with you. But the question is, why do we have Mr. Northcott in this movie? Well, I guess all family films have to have some sort of villain character to steer things up a bit. It's cliched, but effective, nonetheless. So with the emphasis on St. Nick's extended family, which also includes his parents, played by Kathy Bates and Trevor Peacock, and the Mrs. Claus, played by Miranda Richardson, the idea should have focused more closer to the family dynamics and how things work out in the end. But instead, our script takes too much focus on the Northcott storyline and the plot of dethroning Santa Claus, which has been done millions of times before, and the results always come back the same. Somehow, Santa Claus or his cohorts eventually pull through, and on just like a lot of Christmas movies, everything always comes out with a happy ending to some extent. Well, okay, maybe Home Alone did not have an entire happy ending, because when Buzz came and saw his bedroom, he yelled, "Kevin, what did you do to my room?" Or at the end of Home Alone 2, when they discovered that Kevin spent almost $1,000 on room service. Merry Christmas indeed. Oh, Dad! Kevin! You spent $967 on room service! Okay, maybe that Christmas special did not have a complete happy ending, but, most Christmas movies do have happy endings. And it's just so cliche that this one is not any better. Santa wins in the end, and the villain gets his comeuppance. Well, at least I'll say one thing, though. At least Mr. Northcott did not get, like tarnished with gingerbread cookie frosting. Or at least he didn't have a Christmas tree drop down on his head or anything like that. No. And his defeat did not result in him being put in a sticky situation, or he did not drive some kind of toy army tank and started shooting real bullets from it. No. It didn't go down into that epic thing. You see, apparently, Northcott did, eventually Santa's Workshop did get a 3-strike vote. But then Santa Claus gave Mr. Northcott a present. A present that he always wanted. And that was a Superman cape. So he's been moaning and bitching all these years over a present that he wanted since childhood. And now he finally got what he asked for. And that was a Superman cape. Now I bet you're probably asking, why a Superman cape? Well, I will tell you. The reason why he chose the Superman cape or wanted the Superman cape was because when he was in school, he was teased a lot. Because he had glasses. And, because Clark Kent, when he wasn't Superman and went by the alter ego Clark Kent, he wore glasses. But then, when he takes the glasses off and puts on the cape, he becomes a superhero. And that's what Northcott always wanted. So then when he finally got his wish, he decided that he wasn't going to cancel Christmas or shut down the workshop, and the workshop would continue to stay open. So in a way, the villain got his comeuppance, but not in a macabre or evil or even humorous way. All they did was just gave him a present. The gift of love. If there were really any cool scenes in this movie, one of my favorite ones was the sibling rivalries Anonymous, which is like an Alcoholics Anonymous, but instead of alcoholics, you have disgruntled siblings all lamenting over the fact that their siblings had become famous while the others just never did. I mean, you have Roger Clinton, who's the half-brother of Bill Clinton. While Bill Clinton became a well-known, successful governor and became an American president, Roger, although was also in the field of politics, never did reach the same levels as his brother. You also have to say the same for Frank Stallone. While his brother became a big-time action movie star, Frank's career never really took off like that. And then you have Stephen Baldwin, who's the younger brother of Alec, which kind of makes me often wonder how come the other two Baldwins weren't there, like Daniel and Billy. And while Alec became like the big star of the Baldwin brothers, the one who got the most accolades and got the most publicity, then you often wonder, how come it was only just Stephen that was sitting there? I was expecting maybe even Daniel or Billy to be there as well. I mean, what movies was Daniel Baldwin famous in? None? I didn't think so. Okay, Billy was good in movies like Backdraft from 1991. And then you had Steven, whose really only good movie was The Usual Suspects. But then he also did some crappy movies in like Biodome, which pretty much ruined his career. But then again, the Baldwins never really were able to break out of that thick shadow that Alec had. And I thought that was actually pretty cool to see these guys showing their lament and their disdain because of the fact that their brothers were very successful and popular and had all kinds of adulation from the fans, while none of them really ever did reach that level. But by the end of the day, the jokes featured here were done before and nothing really new to offer. Under the direction of David Dobkin, who directed the spine-tingling Wedding Crashers, had to step out of his comfort zone by watering down all the racy jokes from Wedding Crashers for the more family-friendly type jokes, so that kids won't be exposed to adult humor and parents being outraged. But I think maybe kids might probably be exposed because There's a lot of... I don't really actually see this movie even being a PG rated movie. It looks more closer to PG-13 because if you look at Elizabeth Banks' character, what is she supposed to be? She was supposed to be like the head elf. But if she was an elf, then why didn't they make her an elf? I mean, number one, she is seen wearing very suggestive clothing, almost scantily clad, and will seem to be looking more like a sexy elf rather than, just a elf wearing standardized elf costume with the little shoes with the little tinkly bells on there, or why wasn't she wearing sort of like what a typical elf wore? And I also ask myself, why wasn't Elizabeth Banks been made as an elf? Aren't elves supposed to be conventionally small little people? And here we have Elizabeth Banks being an elf, and yet she's normal sized. So I'm like, where did she come from? What was the origin of her story? Nobody knows. And even though I had said earlier that the acting was not very good, it wasn't very good, and it wasn't actually the fault of the performers. I mean, they did all they could in their respective roles. It's just that the material that was given to them didn't do much justice for them. And these are performers I usually like. Vince Vaughn seems to eternally play sort of a bit of a man-child gimmick. And he can play between the lines that balances between naughty and nice. Can't conceal the fact that his over-the-top antics may not always be appropriate to the family-oriented content featured here. In fact, there's a lot of adult humor in this movie. That makes me sometimes wonder if the target audience was for small kids. Because it wasn't. It seemed to deal with a lot of realism, but more for the adults in us, not the kids. So while it was trying to compete with the hugely successful 2003 holiday-themed frat pack film, Elf, it doesn't quite live up to the same comedy standards, let alone special effects, direction, or performances. Fred Claus is definitely stripped from the glittery special effects, and it seems to plaster an absurd, and it seems to depend on darkly themed features that have no place for a family-featured holiday film. And that's kind of where the big weakness is. They were supposed to aim towards kids, but in the end, it just didn't seem that way. When I saw Fred Claus years ago, I was expecting something that might make my holidays brighter. Instead, it was the complete opposite. In fact, it actually drained out my love and appreciation for the holiday season. Okay, maybe it didn't ruin my Christmas, but there was really little to be cheerful about. And in the end, even though the soundtrack had a few Christmas themes to it, I guess after watching this movie, I think I would fill my spirits up with some Baileys and a gingerbread man cookie. So like I said before, this movie was not the worst in the world. The performances were pretty good, solid, maybe not Oscar worthy, but then again, perfectly understandable. This is not an Oscar themed movie. This movie is more holiday themed. There were some comical bits to it that made me laugh, especially the sibling rivalries anonymous. That was funny. There were a few laugh out loud moments but it seemed more adult humor was placed in this movie as opposed to lighthearted cheeriness and sappiness. There was a lot of adult-themed stuff in this movie, and many characters were put in this movie that served almost little to no purpose in it due to poor character development. So in the end, would I recommend this movie? I'm not sure if I could. Because it just didn't sit very well. I'm not going to, like I said, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's certainly far from being the best. There's just a lot of flaws in this movie, and a lot of stuff just put into the script with very little to no impact. So when all is said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I would have to give Fred Claus a 4.5 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments, and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.